Hello, this is Alex from cables.gl. I'd like to show you a really tiny, easy to use animation operator called the LFO. And the LFO sounds a bit scientific in the name, low frequency oscillation for animations. So this low frequency oscillator is something you might hear about or see in maybe like lab equipment or synthesizers and things like that. And they're basically slow moving waves of values that will allow you to hook them up to other parameters and kind of manipulate other stuff with it. And in cables, it's pretty much no different. So the name should kind of be familiar to you if you're from that field. And the way it works is pretty much the same. Okay, so if we look at this example scene and focus on one of these LFOs here, we'll see that it has a time input. So if I unhook this, then that particular LFO is not doing anything with the value output. And if I unhook this one, it's also not doing anything. And this rotation we'll just get rid of for now because it's not an LFO and might be confusing. Okay, so once we hook up a timer to these LFOs, we get something happening, and that means the speed of the timer is also going to be affecting the speed of the LFO. So that's already kind of handy, right? We have really fine control over this animation of the values. So if we mouse over here in the parameter bar, we'll see that this sine wave is animating, and the amplitude sets the kind of min and max of the value output. So it's going from 0.71 to negative 0.71. And if we change it to something bigger, our sphere starts to fly off the screen. But, personally, I usually don't get too deep with this amplitude parameter because we have another operator called map range. And if you're not familiar with that one, definitely check out the tutorial. I'll link it below. And I think that one kind of lets you adjust things a lot finer. But anyway, okay, so what else do we have? We have this thing called phase. And the phase basically means from what value or from what point in this wave will the oscillation start. So what I mean by that is, for example, maybe we can do this visually. Or actually, I have a setup here that I'm going to hook up, and this graph texture operator will get a value from one of these LFOs, and we'll see it on screen as a graph. So let's see if this will work. And then we'll hook up this one. And then I think it's just tiny. Okay, so here is a graph that's easy for us to see. And then I'll try to restart by, I have a mouse button hooked up to the timer. So whenever I click it, it will restart the timer. And I'll try to show you what this phase parameter does. So if I click on my canvas, you'll see that the sine wave starts from the bottom, right? And then it goes up. And then if I change this phase to 0.5 and I click it, now it's kind of starting from the middle, right? So when I click, you'll see that it jumps from the middle. And then if I do 1, we're going from the top now. So what you can do is use this phase, which, the best range to use here is 0 to 1, and it will kind of offset the beginning of this shape that you've selected. So if I select triangle, now we're seeing a triangle. And if I restart my timer, we're going from the top. And then if I do my phase at 0.5 again, we'll go from the middle. And then from 0, we'll go from the bottom. So you can use this phase to kind of offset the animation of your LFO, which is something I did here with this funny sphere bouncing around, because I have my phase set to 0.5 on the x-axis, and on the y-axis, I don't have a phase set. And what happens when I'm changing the x and y position of the sphere with this offset, I get this kind of circular movement. Because look, if I set this phase to 0, now we're just going from corner to corner constantly, right? So I guess it's a little bit confusing, but um, I think if you start to understand like the basics of the LFO, you should get some ideas of how can I manipulate the animation or the different values that are coming out of it. It just LFO by itself is relatively simple, but then when you start combining them with other LFOs, you can get really kind of complex shapes or complex value animations from it. And let's try this again with the graph. So I'll disable this sphere in the background. And we're just going to look at this triangle LFO. Okay, so we can imagine this animation from, we'll make it 1, from 1 to -1. Could be useful, right, for maybe moving something, or maybe we'll change a color or a hue of something back and forth. Or, for example, if we want to go from 0 to 1, we can use the ramp, and we can maybe change the hue that way, so it will animate from 0 to 1. But what if we have a sign here, and then we'll change the amplitude with another LFO? And I'll animate this one as well. Timer. So right now they're synchronized, and if I start to offset them, we'll start getting an interesting shape, and then I'll make this one a bit faster, so maybe the effect is even clearer. So you see, we have this repetitive animation, but because we're starting to stack our LFOs, we can start to get kind of interesting repetition in our pattern. And of course, you can change the shape, and then maybe even modulate the phase with an LFO. So we'll plug in an LFO to the phase and then time this. And you start to get into not exactly random, like completely not random shapes here, but you'll start to get interesting patterns that you can offset, and they will kind of change over time. And I think that's about it. And yeah, basically, I think stacking LFOs is completely on it's not common, but I think it should be, because you can get really funky shapes with it. All right, that's it. Bye.